All right. Hey, welcome to Friday, everybody. Glad you're here. Or if you're here, that's all good. So, yeah, I had a great week. I think the Wednesday video did really well. The idea is common mistakes around React, and in particular, useEffect, useCallback, and useMemo, which can be kind of a pain in the butt. And in fact, actually, is so well received. I'll probably do another take on that this weekend and put that out because there's some more to say around things like timers and dependency arrays when it comes to objects and arrays and things like that. But basically, the idea is this. So I get a lot of people asking me, "Hey, can you help me out on this React thing or that React thing?" And sometimes it's pretty sort of simple stuff. Hey, Sheldon. Hey, Jesse. Happy Friday to you. And welcome to the new digs live this time. My wife got some flowers for us, so pretty cool. How can I get started? I only know C++. Woo, that's going to be a lot if we're going to go from C++ to JavaScript in this video. So love to help you, Marshall, but probably not on this. But just stick around and maybe you'll get some cool stuff by osmosis. Yeah. All right, cool. So yeah, thank you for coming. And so here, the idea behind these live streams on Friday is that if there are questions you wanted to ask, or you're like, you didn't cover that all that well, just drop them into the channel and we'll go for it. Oh, also, and a little bit different from last time or from usual, there is the Discord server. And there's a really cool new channel on there around interviewing. And so I'm basically putting up interview questions. And so this is for folks who want to learn, sorry. This is for folks who want example interview questions that I might ask or somebody else might ask. And generally speaking, it's going to be around TypeScript or JavaScript or React. We'll see. Somebody's asked for like Vue ones, and I'm like, okay, I'll go. Sure, why not? Maybe some Svelte. I'll throw it in there. But actually, they're pretty cool. I think the first one was around building a timer, and then there was another one that was basically more just sort of generic TypeScript. But basically, I give you an example prompt, and then you come back with, your solution to that, and I'll tell you if you're right or not. Cool. Really know when to not use useEffect. Okay, so I mean, one of the things that I mentioned in the video was pretty much everything between the definition of the function itself in the case of a functional component, which is when you use hooks. You probably want in a hook conservatively, and you are going to choose between, in the case of altering state, you're going to choose between useEffect, which means that which is when you change state based on data changing, other props changing, or like an external event like a fetch or a set interval or something like that, or a user interaction change, which you'd use for you'd use callback for. So okay, hey, hi Mark, good to see you. That was great. And so let's dig into this. And I'll try and think about when not to use useEffect, but this is not one of those cases. So here's the idea. We've got this my component. It's got a list of numbers that it's going to get, and it's going to fetch that from this numbers.json file. That numbers.json file has these, pretty simple payload in it. So ideally, this numbers is going to be 1, 2, 3. We then convert that response to JSON. We then take that data back and we put it in numbers 0. Now, number 0 is, in the case of useState, the value. And people really think, I think, that, and I've certainly seen this by how they write their code, that they really believe that just setting the value of what comes back from useState without the function is actually going to do something. And it's really, 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 really not. So I'm hoping to disabuse you of that notion. So let's have a look at what's happening here. So go over to our browser, and basically we're getting an empty array. So why are we getting an empty array? Well, let's think about this. So we're going through this component. We set up our use state. That looks cool. We fire off our fetch. And then I think some people will also believe that this is synchronous, right? this request comes back, and then this runs, and then that sets that value, and away you go. Well, that's not how this happens. So let's go and add some console logs in, and I'll prove that to you. So let's see. So my component, put in some console logs over here, start up, and then we'll say we started the fetch. And then we'll go and render it. Let's see. Okay, so let's also just cache out that result, because I think people will also believe that there's some specialness going on with these templates down here. There's really not, but let's see. So we're going to render React nodes. That's what that's doing. When you create, like, you do this JSX in here, you're just creating nodes for React, and then we're going to return that. And I'll put that down there. Returns. Okay, cool. So this is not going to change the behavior at all, but it will show us what's going on. So, all right, we see that we started up. Cool. We started our fetch. We rendered our nodes, and then we returned. Now, yeah, React is absolutely asynchronous. Exactly. Well, all JavaScript is asynchronous, and fetch in particular is asynchronous. Well, actually, let me do a disclaimer on that. The only thing asynchronous in here is this fetch. So we can see that we did our startup, we did the fetch, we did the render of the nodes, and we did the return. So let's see when this fetch resolved. So I'm going to go put that in there. Let's see. Fetch resolved, and then fetch done. Cool. So clear the console, refresh, and now we can see that we started up, we did our fetch, we did all the thing, we returned, right? And now after that, asynchronously, then we got our return from our fetch, and now that fetch is done. And why that actually gets run twice, I haven't really looked into all that much, but it's not all that big of a deal, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay. So if I were to go in here and I were to say, just kind of debugging it, thinking like, oh yeah, maybe what I need to do is, if I were to just kind of set it directly here, would that make sense? I mean, am I setting the wrong thing, right? Maybe that's the case. So I could just like A, B, C, something like that, And yeah, okay, so that goes through, and that's, because we're setting the value. So this is actually the right thing to do. We're setting we're looking at the right spot. We're just not setting it properly. We're not letting React know that we have gotten new data. And that's when you use this setter. So the return from useState is actually an array, and you can destructure that array and get out the numbers, which again is just a simple old vanilla JavaScript array, and then a setter, so set numbers. And that's a function that you use to go and tell React that, hey, here's the new value. So let's try this out. Let's get rid of this because we don't want to do that. And then we'll do set numbers there. And the only other thing we need to change, I guess, is that. Okay, cool. And this is going to make my browser freak out. So I'm going to hit save. All right, and so we can see that it's basically doing just a ton of this stuff. So over and over and over again. Let's see, is it actually going to show the network panel? It sometimes doesn't, because at this point, Chrome has just lost itself. All right, here we go. So let's see, can I get it real fast? Oh, yep, okay. Can I bring up the inspector? Yes. Okay, there we go. So we can start to see that it just completely, continuously runs and gets numbers.json over and over and over and over and over again. All right, let me just, okay, so binary 64. How can you show us how to have state that is initially set from props, but also reset whenever the props change? Great question. Okay, let me go through the useEffect stuff so that where I'm not crashing my browser, and then we'll deal with that props when I'm done with this. But it's a great question, awesome question. So what we need to do is we need to use useEffect in here, because we're changing. We want to set state, but we want to set state in response to either a prop changing or the component being loaded or an asynchronous action happening. So in this case, that is an asynchronous action, and that would be that fetch. So let's go over here to useEffect, bring that in. As my machine starts to go to crawl, see if I can let me bring up a blank page and then kill these as Chrome's just eating my machine. There we go. Cool. Okay. And so how does useEffect work? Well, useEffect takes a function and then a dependency array. But we're not going to put any dependency array in yet because we're just going to imagine that this is going to somehow magically work. If we just wrap everything in a useEffect, that should be good enough, right? It's going to magically figure out what we're doing and magically get rid of this problem. So let's see, does that work? Localhost 3000, well, it certainly shows up, but again, we're in this infinite loop of things just going on and on and on and on and on. And what's happening there is that, so this function gets rendered, useEffect goes, and it gets run. And then at that point, we start another fetch, which sets the numbers, which in turn restarts the whole process again. The entire component gets re-rendered, meaning this entire function gets rerun, which in turn, again, calls useEffect, which because there's no dependency array, gets run again. So if you leave your dependency arrays off, then that's a bad thing. Oh, I was going to do the rules thing. Okay, so let's make some rules as we go along here. Rules, first one is use the setter from useState. And then number 2, have a dependency array. Specify a dependency array. Otherwise, it's just going to run all the time. Dependency array, which is really just nothing different from what you got before. So that's not great. So we have an array. And then a lot of people also like, okay, cool. Well, I'm setting numbers, so I must depend on numbers. So they put this in here, and then they save it. And then they rerun. And wouldn't you know, you get exactly the same problem again. So hold on. Yet again, my browser's crashing. Yep, we're still crashing. So here's the deal. So how does this dependency array work? Well, this dependency array looks at does a shallow comparison of all the values that are listed in that array. So in this case, it would be a reference to the array of numbers. So what happens is we get our initial array reference, we put it in there, and then we run that useEffect. We get back a new array. So we have a new array reference. We set that. We come back in here. We compare that new array reference to what we'd had previously. And wouldn't you know it, we're different. So got to rerun, which reruns the fetch. So continuous loop around that. Now, if you wanted to keep numbers in here, the safest way to do that would be to go and check, well, hey, you know, what do I actually, what am I getting back? Or should I run this fetch? And you could say, well, cool, fine. I can see if the number's length is 0. In that case, I'm going to run the fetch. Like that. Let's try that out. And again, got to fix Chrome. This is like the one video where because all of the bad cases here are all result in infinite loops, it just kills my machine. Okay, so yeah, cool. This is great. So we actually worked. So here's what's happening. We ran the startup, the component started up. We got that fetch came back, and then it went to, oh, cool. I'm going to go rerun that component. I'm going to go re-render it. And at which point it looks in here and it says, cool, well, numbers.length is not 0, and therefore I'm not going to run that fetch again. Now, another possibility of fixing this would be, and I didn't do this in the original video, but I'll do that here, is to do numbers.length. So numbers.length is going to start off at 0 because it's an empty array. And then it's going to be 3, which is going to be different. Actually, will this work? Well, let's give it a try. All right, hold up. Let's give this a go. Yeah. Oh, it ran 2 times, which is not quite what we want, but here's why. So, okay. So numbers.length started at 0. We ran that fetch. We got 3 back. We then put 3 in there, and that re-ran the fetch again. And so that came back with another 3, and that stopped the spin, because we went 0, 3, 3, because we have 3 numbers in that JSON file. So all of that's just kind of janky and weird, and I wouldn't write it that way. The way I would write it would be just to remove this entirely. And what that amounts to is an onload. So that's basically saying, cool, useEffect starts off with an undefined dependency array. It compares dependency array on load versus what's in there. And an empty array like that is different from undefined. And so that's why, if you run this now, we will get 1 and exactly 1 fetch, because of the way that we've structured that useEffect. So that is the correct way to write an onload and handle a fetch that you want to do when you initially start up using React hooks. Okay. So I'm going to go try and see if we can work with Binary 64's question here. So can you show us how to have a state that is initially set from props, but also reset whenever the props change? Sure. Okay, let's see here. So if I want to go and have a URL, okay. And it's going to start off with, let's see, numbers.json. And this is basically saying, cool, I want you to go get this data from here. So I'm going to go over here and make it a property like that. And then what I can do is I can make this a dependency on this fetch. So I can fetch that URL and I can make a dependency on that. So let's try it out. Cool. Okay. So basically the same thing happened. So I got in this property. Hey now. There we go. Cool. And then let me go get rid of a couple consoles in here, because we don't really need that much anymore. We'll return that. All right, this is looking more like a standard React component. And also, let's go and make another numbers. So let's see, it's big numbers, JSON. I'll make it 100, 200, 300, like that. 3,000, sure, why not? Okay, cool. And we'll go over here to our app again. And then we're going to set some state. And we'll call it URL. And we will have a set URL that comes back from that. And we'll set that initial value to numbers.json. And then we'll use that URL to populate that property, like so. And now we want to be able to go, well, let's try it out. Let's see how that works. And yeah, we're getting that warning, set URL is not assigned. Fair enough. Okay, looks good. Everything's cool. So let's now make a button that would go and reset that value. So button, go big or go home. And then it's going to have an on-click on it. And now we'll say set to big URL. And okay, so this actually starts getting into my other parts of this, but I'll go and do it the old school way I used to do it before recently. So I'm gonna not use a use callback. I'm just gonna go and create a constant function there, and we'll just say, hey, so we want to go with big numbers now. Cool. I love how big that button got. That's cool. All right, let's go big or go home. Hey, very cool. So this is actually pretty neat. So what's happening here is we have our initial version of that component URL, or that URL coming in as a prop. And then it comes down here and it starts off as numbers.json. And then when I click that button, that value URL is changed. And then this useEffect is rerun because that URL has changed. So pretty cool, actually. I would say that's, nice. I don't know if I've actually answered your question, though. Okay, so how can you show us how to have a state that is initially set from the props, but also reset whenever the prompts change? Oh, that's a good one. Well, okay, great. So let's actually, let's see. This still doesn't give me state, but all right, let me continue on with the different things. So actually, let's go with the first off, use callback. And so use callback is the preferable way to actually create one of these callbacks. So I'm going to go over here, use callback. But again, it takes a dependency array, which I will set to nothing right now, and then see if that works. That's interesting. Yes, I did forget to pass a dependency array. I haven't seen that warning before. Let's try it. Okay, that works good. That works well. What you do if you actually did a console is you'd see that every single time that we go through here, we're still creating a new function each time. And so just like with useEffect, the dependency array works the same way. So if we just want to go and create that callback once, that we'd use an empty array for that, just like that. But that's the cool thing, right? So if we wanted to go and change this URL, in fact, actually, ooh, that's a cool idea. Yeah. Yes. So here's what I can do. I can say I want to go send. Nah. Okay. Let me go back into my example and finish it up. This is the fun of doing these live streams, to kind of get off a little bit, trying to answer some of these questions and trying to figure out how to make it work within that. Okay, so let me make sure that we've got our rules. So specify dependency array. Let's see. Also use empty array for onload, and then don't use any state you set in the dependency array unless you are careful about it. And that was what we learned when we did like the numbers thing in there. That numbers equal 0, because you can get into an infinite loop if you've got a state setter in the same useEffect or use callback as you do when you set. If you have the dependency to the same thing you set in there, you have the potential of making an infinite loop. Don't like we did. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing, and that's I want to be able to have a callback in here, which is going to go and add a number to this. So I have a div, have another button on here called add 1. Oh, hey, thanks, Chris. That's awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And it's going to take an on click. It's going to say on add 1. And as I mentioned before, you could do it this way, but a decent rule to go by is that everything between the declaration of the component at the top, or the declaration of the function, and when you actually return something in terms of the template or the JSX nodes or whatever, should be inside of either useEffect, use callback, use memo, use state, whatever. Should be one of those. Okay, so in this case, because it's a user interaction, we're going to use callback. And again, I'm going to go and set it so that it only runs once. And then we're just going to go and add a number to our list of numbers. So I'm going to say set numbers, and we're going to take the existing numbers that we've got, and we'll just go and add one. So let's see, numbers.length, or maybe just math.random, whatever. Go with something else. All right, there we go. So this is going to add some random numbers to things. And it's already giving us some warnings that are basically telling us what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so I'm going to add some numbers. Whoa, geez, that's pretty crazy. So I'm getting these big old random numbers in there, but I'm not getting the original content. I'm not getting 1, 2, 3, and then the number, which is not great. So is use callback the problem? Maybe, let's see. So if I were to just go and say cool, const add 1 is that the old-fashioned way. Heck with this use callback stuff. Let's see what happens. Okay, so, that actually works. Okay, so it is use callback, and there's something about the way that we're doing use callback that's not quite right. So let's go take a look and try and figure that out. And the clue is in here. React hook use callback is missing a dependency on numbers. So what's happening here is a combination of hooks and also JavaScript closures. And JavaScript closures are something that is really different from, like, if somebody asked about going from C++ to JavaScript. This is something where I don't think there's any concept like this in C++ of a closure. So what's happening here is we come down here, we have this use callback. It runs this function to go in, or it creates a reference to that function. And that function, in creating that reference, it captures this value, numbers, at that point. And then the value of numbers at that point is just an empty array. And so when I do this on add one, it comes in here, it says, cool, all right, I'm going to go and unpack the empty array, which is not empty now, and then go and add on random. And that's why when you click on this, you go from having 1, 2, 3 to just having one random number. So how do we fix that? Well, there's two different ways to fix that. One is I could just add this, and I think this is actually the more elegant solution. You can just add a dependency on numbers. And so what happens is this on add one gets updated every time numbers changes. I hit refresh, and it looks good. Problem solved. But there's actually a different way to do it again, and that's what I can do now. Like, I can basically say in set numbers, there's two different variations on this. You can either just give it a new value like this, or you can give it a function, and it'll give that function the current numbers, current value, and then you can then give it a new value. So in this case, it would be current value. And now it's telling me, hey, you got this dependency and you don't actually need it. So I can get rid of that. And now it works. And something, I guess, better in some ways is that this on add one is now evergreen. It'll work regardless of the state, because it just basically takes the existing state and mutates it. So that's kind of cool. And as we go into like building our own custom hooks, those kind of things make a big difference, because if somebody were to go and add this on add one to, you know, oh, I'm gonna go and call this on add one from my useEffect, and I'm gonna put that in there like that, this useEffect would, in this case, would only ever get run the once, because on add one is never going to change. It's always going to be evergreen. But if you add this, if you add numbers in there like that, then each time on add one updates, this useEffect will also get updated or run, because that on add one, the reference to that function changes. So things to think about. I mean, this is pretty complex stuff, actually. So, you know, people kind of take hooks and, you know, I understand it. There's a lot of little nuances, a lot of mistakes to be made. Okay, so before I get into useMemo, let me catch up on my comments. Let me take a look at Sophia's comment. I know there's always say enter everything and use an useEffect and hook and dependency array. I agree. But is it really necessary for functions? I find myself adding a ton of set state functions there inside of use state. So Sophia, like, what you're saying, I find myself adding a ton of set state functions there. You don't mean inside of a useEffect, right? Because you shouldn't do that. So let me know and in the comments, and there you go. Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, Christopher. Very nice. Thank you. Is there a point to multiple useEffects with different dependencies? Definitely, Vlad. Absolutely. Yes, I often have multiple useEffects cascading in a row that do different things. And they have different dependencies on them. And sometimes there'll be a useEffect that depends on a useMemo or some other state that was set previously. Vlad, isolate logic. Okay, so got a good answer from Sergio there. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so Sophia, let me know and try and get that answer for you. So let's see. Okay, is there any rules to learn from the use callback thing? I see. I would say just say use callback for callbacks. That's, you know, as opposed to not doing it. There is actually a really good article from Kent C. Dobbs on the performance impact of use callback and useMemo. And there is a little bit of a performance downside of using useMemo and use callback. But at the same time, he does make the point at the end of the article around referential integrity, which is what I was trying to get to before, which is, there is value in the reference to something not changing, because in your dependency arrays, you generally are depending on a reference and not depending on the actual value. Okay, so Sophia answered, yes, if you have a set number inside of a useEffect, ESLint would suggest, yeah. You add this set number to the dependency array. Interesting. I've never seen it. So it's not telling us to do set numbers here, right? Because it knows that that's the setter. But if you were to go again, if I were to say, let's see, if I were to put numbers in here, like so, numbers, and I'm just going to go and add on the data. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, then it's going to tell me, hey, by the way, you're missing a dependency on numbers. So we go and add in that. Ooh, and then we run into that issue of being cyclical, right? Because now we're setting numbers, but we're also getting numbers. We also depend on numbers, and that's going to end up in that infinite loop of badness. So, yeah, what I would recommend is in that case, use the setter, use the functional version of setter where you're getting the current value and then setting something, and then that's going to get React off your back about having those missing dependencies. And it's also going to make those hooks more evergreen, right? So that's good, because you're always going to be working against the current state as opposed to whatever state you had when you first created that JavaScript closure. Okay, so and then let's talk about useMemo, which is like the hook that nobody knows about, the unknown hook, useMemo. So let's go make a list, or not a list, but let's go sum up these numbers. So sum. And I'm going to create a sum here. Now to create a sum, I'm going to use cool JS magic and use the reduce function on the array. Then I'm going to take the accumulator, there's the current value, and I'm going to take the new value or the current value and then add those two together. And I'm going to start it at 0. And there we go. So that's going to be our sum. And I'm not super keen on this random now. Let me go and just see current value dot length plus 1. That's gonna make it a little bit easier to realize if I'm doing things right or not. Okay, so now 1, 2, 3 sums up to 6. Yay! And if I add 1, it sums up to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4 makes sense. Cool. So let's say that this was an expensive synchronous computation, right? What we'd use is useMemo. And this is basically saying, cool. Let's bring in, okay, so every time this changes, this dependency array, then rerun this function and get that output. And it's actually really interesting. This is one of the ones, like useEffect doesn't actually get run until after the component renders. Same thing with useCallback. useCallback doesn't get run until you actually call it as a callback. But useMemo, this function gets run right then. That's why it has to be synchronous, right? So, but it is telling us that we've got this problem. So again, missing dependency on numbers, but let's go take a look and see what happens. So if I hit save there, and go back here, it says sum is 0. And if I go and add some more, sum is still 0, and that's not great. If I go and change that out, sum is still 0, so that's not great. So what's happening is similar sort of thing with basically everything we've gone through so far, which is that we start off with an empty array, and then we go down here, we come to this part, and we immediately execute this function. And if you do reduce on an empty array, it doesn't do anything. It basically takes this default value and returns that, which in this case is 0. So let's go and put in numbers. So we'll say recompute the sum every time numbers changes, which when you think about it is exactly what we want to do. And that's why one of the reasons I encourage you to do a lot of these hooks like this is because actually once you get the hang of it, it really starts to make more sense, and you can start kind of grouping stuff logically together and chaining things, and it actually turns out to be a really elegant way to do reactive programming. Okay, so let's save that out and see if it works. Oh, it even worked when look at that. Pretty cool. Nice. Very cool. And you think about it, right? This is actually really clean. Hey, give me a sum, and then only run it if those numbers change. if I were to go in and add in another thing here, let's see. Let's go and put a console log in here. Console log creating numbers like that. Okay, cool. And I'm gonna return that. And let's see. I'm gonna have some other thing going on here. I'm gonna go and have an index. All right, so set index. We'll start that at 0. This is just so I can have a different value going into this thing, into my component every time, and we can kind of see what happens. So I'm going to say, all right, add 1 to the index, 1, 2, and we just give it the index. All right, and we'll say add 1 to index. And again, we'll go and make a use callback because we're now in the mode of doing everything in these hooks. Again, it's going to be evergreen. Actually, you know what? We'll make it not evergreen. We'll say that it depends on index, and then it sets index to index plus 1. So this is going to get recomputed every time that we change index. But it's not going to get run because it's a callback. So that's fine. All right, let's go over here. So add 1 to 0, add 1 to 1. Cool. So notice that we ran that creating numbers twice. So why do we do that? Well, let's go and have a look. So let's go and put out what numbers was there. JSON, stringify numbers. Then we actually got to put it in a text template. Okay, oops, that's wrong. There you go, cool. All right, so cool. So we started off with an empty array, and then our JSON response came back with 1, 2, 3, and then we did it. But now I am still sending this new value to that. In fact, actually, let me pump it through so we can show you that it actually is in there. So let's see, index. It's like the world's ugliest looking components at this point, but okay, here we go. So now we've got index 7, and so we can see that the component is re-updating every time, but those numbers, let's just start from scratch again here, those numbers don't get changed. So that function, that useMemo function, is insulating us from doing that reduce over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, cool. So Sophia, I could be mistaken, but it doesn't ask you to add set state functions to dependency arrays. No, it doesn't. I think it was happening because I'm using Jotai, not React to use state. Maybe so. Kudos to you for using Jotai. That's awesome. But in this case, it would be safe to avoid adding the setter functions. It should be safe to avoid adding the setter functions to the dependency array since it never changes. Yes. Yeah, the setter will never, ever change. Hello, Jack Charrington. I'm a viewer. Thank you, some dev stuff. All right. So, yeah. Well, that was very fun. Let me see. Let me go and add any more rules. Let's see. So use useMemo for expensive to calculate derived values synchronously. Right, and that's really the key thing when it comes to use memos is you're deriving some data. So in this case, we're taking the numbers and we're deriving a sum, and then we're also doing it synchronously. So don't put anything asynchronous inside of your use memo because this use memo is run right then. Right, that function is always run. Okay. Oh, some great new questions. Okay, so I've learned a hook to use memo. Nice. What's a hook for me? Which one? I don't know. So rules of thumb, like which let's see, which hooks to use. So I would say useEffect is going to happen when load or unload, or actually more just load. for asynchronous functions. By that I mean set timeout, set interval, or fetch, or anything else asynchronous. Let's see. Let me spell that properly. And let's see, useCallback is for user interaction. And useEffect for setting state. And useCallback for setting state. And then useMemo is just for creating derived state. Derived state synchronously. So if you're like, hey, which one should I use for what? Hopefully this will let you know. That's a nice little cheat sheet there for when to use each one of these. Okay, what's the difference between useEffect and useMemo exactly? useEffect is run after the component renders. So useEffect, we cache this function and we run it after the component renders, and we only run it again based on the dependency URL. useMemo is run immediately. This function is run immediately every time this changes. So that's the key, the salient difference between useEffect and useMemo is that useMemo returns a value, but useEffect only runs after the component is actually rendered. I started watching the stream started, but your comments seem like you're saying that we shouldn't create event handlers and stuff inside the body of the React component. Well, you should, but you should use callback for that. Yes, again, I totally get the performance reasons and all that, but if you want to be safe about it, everything between the definition of the function up at the top and whatever you're returning at the bottom should be in some sort of either invoking a callback or as part of a hook. It should either be, like a use state or a use callback or use effect, whatever. Okay, do these samples go and get? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll post this to Git. Hooks are asynchronous, right? Not all, right? So useEffect is definitely asynchronous. So let me put that on there too. So useEffect. Let's see. useEffect and useCallback are asynchronous. Cronus, wow. And then useMemo is synchronous. And let's see. And useState is synchronous. Cool. Cool. All right. Well, that was the end of the Wednesday video, and this has been awesome. Thank you so much for all of the great questions, and of course, Christopher, thank you, for the donation. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm pretty sure over the weekend I'll be doing another video that's around timers, and that actually shows some other elements of useEffect that can be very, very tricky. But if you want to try your hand at that, before we get that video, there is a fun, I've been posting interview questions on the interview channel on my Discord server, and I'll go and give you guys an invite to that. And so in my quest to make sure that you have all the tools you need to land that job that you want, I'm basically going and giving you the questions that I would ask of a React or a TypeScript developer ahead of time, so you get to try your hand at it, and then I'll tell you whether you did it right or not. And in this most recent one, actually, I asked for a hook that would, given a set of events in time, it was like here, I'll show you. Okay, so it's used time state. So it's basically a use state, but I want it to be timed so that after a second, the state is this. After 2 seconds, the state is that. After 4 seconds, the state is that. And it's actually really interesting, and it's also very interesting in terms of how it works within TypeScript. So really fun stuff. And yeah, as I say, I'm there for you. And if you want to try your hand at this, I'm happy to tell you if you got it right or got it wrong, and then help you get it right. Okay. Cool. Well, anyway, thanks for showing up. Thanks for hanging out on a Friday with me. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And yeah, and I'll see you next Wednesday, and then on next week. Much appreciated. Thanks to see you. And also, I'm just gonna hang out over on my Discord server in the general voice channel, or maybe the video channel. Is that? And so you can ask me any questions over there if you don't want to ask me questions in the stream or whatever, and you have any questions that you like, are too shy to ask. Anyway, jump on over there, and I'll see you there. But in the meantime, have a great weekend.